Ashe County Oral History Project. An interview with Ruth Vannoy. Interviewer Clarice Weaver, April 22nd, 1981. Could I have maybe your full name, Ruth, and where you were born and when, and if you don't mind telling, and your parents' name?
Well, you want my maiden name, Ruth Josephine Ham Vannoy, is that what?
That's good. And when were you born?
May the 26th, 1970.
1917. Now, what was your daddy and mother's name?
My daddy's name was Felix Monroe Ham, and my mother was Laura Jane Little Ham.
Well, there's a lot of interesting genealogy. Let's go on back just a little farther. What was your daddy's daddy and mother's name?
My daddy's name, my granddaddy's name was Isaac Ham, and my grandma's name was Nancy.
Did you know them?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How about the little?
Lee Little, and Bashy Little.
Lee and Bashy.
Yeah.
Do you know beyond those?
Well, no. Grandpa Buck Miller, I've heard of him.
So you didn't. Well, that takes you back a few years, doesn't
Yeah.
it? I want to talk with you, Ruth. You're not as old as some of the elderly people we're talking to, but I know you are a retired postmistress here at the Husk Post Office. When did you start working?
December the 14th, 1957.
57. Now, before that, your brother, I guess, was he the post?
Well, Will Little was postmaster before me. Now, my brother was postmaster, but I've forgotten the dates. I don't know the dates. He was postmaster before Will Little, which is my uncle.
And they each had a store, just a stone's throw away from each other.
Right.
Well, we might mention how why the post office zigzagged from the uncle to the nephew. One was Democrat and one was Republican. Is that right?
That's right.
And back in those days, when
they changed, as politics changed in those days, if a Republican had it and a Democrat come in, well, then it went to the Democrat for that term. Yeah.
Well, since they were both right at the depot and where the train, the post office was, it
was handy.
It was handy. Yeah. Well, there was two stores flourishing at that time here.
Yes, because of the transportation, people had to walk to the store or ride horses and bring their eggs and their chickens.
So you bought all produce. Now, when I'm saying you, your brother had the store before you, as well as the post office. So it was really a thriving community, the Nella community.
That's right, it sure was.
Well, now, the post office is Husk and the
depot was Nella.
I see. That name was changed from Allen, wasn't it?
Yes, when it was originated, and the train first come through, it was Allen, and come to find out there's a depot down the country by the name of Allen, and they were getting all of the freight down there that belonged up here. So they decided to reverse Allen, and that made Nella.
Oh. Well, the Husk Post Office and the Nella
community or depot
was right there, same spot. Now, these old stores that we're talking about, years gone by, they served as, you could sell your produce and get due bills. It's sort of a banking type thing, too.
Well, that's right, too. We didn't have any, or they didn't have any food stamps at that time.
Right.
And I've seen my brother have a maul or a pellet and mash the butter down in a big old wooden bucket.
People sold butter too, didn't they? Butter and eggs and.
Well, he bought hides too.
Oh, oh, really?
And roots and herbs. You know,
Uh-huh.
they'd bring their roots and herbs there.
That's right. That's
Uh-huh.
right. All the little children gathered in, and
Uh-huh.
older people
And
gathered.
then I've
with
seen
them.
many of a person pass when I was a little girl with a hen under their arm or going to the store. And of course they could get sugar and coffee and everything for that hen.
Uh-huh. And he sold yard material to
Yeah,
make
that's right.
clothes out of dress material, and you really didn't have to go
And hardware.
you didn't have to go to West Jefferson unless it's something. He sold a little bit of medicines too, didn't he?
Oh yes, there's drugs. Like liniment and Epsom salts and
Did he use?
Japanese oil.
Is that right? Quinine did he use? Did he
I
have?
guess so, yeah. See, there wasn't anything restricted.
Mm-hmm.
You could,
Sell whatever the need was in the
Yeah.
community.
there's nobody to inspect or to bother you.
Now, when say in our lifetime, the store was supplied, stocked with such things as dress shoes for the ladies, and
Work shoes too for the men.
and as they said, the arctics, the boots, and what
Yeah.
have you. So a country store like then was quite necessary for a little community, wasn't it?
That's right. Oh yes, they couldn't have gone further because of the transportation and so
Mhm.
on.
Now, when he first started his store, he's dead now, of course,
Uh-huh.
your brother. How did they get the produce in here? Was it by train? The train came by.
Uh-huh.
Or did-
Well, yeah, they got their goods and everything by train, and then I believe at that time in the postal service they could ship their eggs. We didn't have a produce man, and they shipped their eggs and everything by train.
Is that right?
Ever who was postmaster at that time would get the postage too, you see.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That's good business, wasn't it? too?
And I remember Brenna's shipping hides and things. You know, they had the places to ship them to.
Mhm.
Rabbit.
Furs and all. Did they ship the live? Not the live, the whole rabbit out
Yeah,
there?
I
What
think
did,
they
What
did.
did they do?
I don't know how they did it. I don't know.
It would have been.
But I've seen them hanging.
They must have killed them in the spring and when it's still cold weather,
I guess in the winter.
and shipped them out. Now, how did they keep the butter from melting?
Well, I don't know. It didn't look too good.
I guess it got pretty rank. What did they do with it when it was shipped? Do you know what they made out of it?
No, I don't know.
I've often wondered what they did with that butter that would have been so strong and from the sitting in the barrels.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, that was a pretty good way for the children in the community.
But they were happy. People were happy then.
Mhm.
They didn't have too many worries.
It's a sort of self-sufficient
Uh-huh.
existence,
Mhm,
wasn't it?
That's right.
So were you in the still in the post office when the train
Yes.
went out?
Yes. I waved and cried. I missed it. I missed when they took the mail off the train. Now the mail went out real good when we could put the mail on the train. You know, there'd be mail going south or there'd be mail going north back to Abington.
Mm-hmm.
And but I missed the train when
Mhm.
they took it out.
Oh yeah, it meant a lot to the rural areas, didn't it? Now let's reminisce just a little bit about, say, when you grew up in this settlement. Of course, you were too little to remember much about World War I, weren't you?
Well, when my Uncle Will went to the army, I was 6 weeks old.
Mm-hmm. But now they hauled the men out on this.
Mama said that they would come in droves from Helton and out of the mountain and Little Horse Creek, and they'd always go and meet the train to watch the boys leave, and then they'd meet them coming back.
Is that right?
And then when we had no phones, and they would go and listen for the phone in the depot to get news in and out
Is that right?
from Abington and Bristol.
So they had a phone up there at the depot.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, your mother, now she saw a lot of changes in Ashe County. How long has she been dead?
Mama died in 61.
Well, she really saw some changes, didn't she?
Yeah, she did. She saw a lot of change.
Well, still in World War II, a lot of the boys were using the train to leave out on, weren't they? And come home.
I believe, yes. I believe we had one coach then.
Now, earlier they had, I guess, as I recall hearing other people talk about it, and I know your mother's talked to you about, they must have had 2 or 3 trains running daily at first.
Yeah, we had the passenger and then the freight.
So that's a busy spot. Now, you had a side rail. What is it they call that?
Switch.
A switch over here too at the Nella
that's
community.
right.
It's too bad it's gone, isn't it?
Yes, I miss it. I still listen to the train.
Yeah. It's just too bad. Well, they also, I've heard different ones say, and I know it to be true, that occasionally in emergency they took patients out on the train to the Abington Hospital before we got the Ashe Memorial Hospital.
I remember one boy that they picked up down the road here about a mile that had been stabbed.
Oh, really?
And they carried him to Abington. But he died over there.
Is that right?
And then I heard of a woman, they carried her in snowdrifts to Whitetop and put her on the train to, Sister Sophie couldn't deliver the baby. And they got her on the train. Well, the train waited on her in Whitetop till they knew they were coming with her on a sled. And they took her to Abington.
Well, the train's meant an awful lot to us.
Yes, it has. It sure has.
It's just meant so much. It's too bad it had to go. Now, you saw right many changes, I bet, in the post office, didn't you?
Well, yes, there's changes every week. The major change that I can recall was in my service was when they took it out of politics and we had a board of directors, committee.
So a person could gather seniority then, couldn't they?
That's right.
You didn't have much of a chance to retire if the political climate seesawed, didn't you?
Not too much.
Or did you have, some of the postmasters, did they sort of change their view of politics ever so often?
That was told. You know, you hear of things by grapevine that some of them changed from Republican to Democrat in the
whichever way it went, they went that way.
That was told.
Well, they could stay in a little longer that way.
That's right.
I guess there's been a big pay increase from the time you started, hasn't there?
Well, yes, you build it, and get raises and so on. Yeah.
Now, do they still hand stamp the?
They do at Husk.
Do they?
Yeah.
Well, that's a thing of the past in most places.
Yes.
Yeah. With some of those old.
Of course, it's just fourth class office.
Fourth class.
But there's not many of those left.
No, I would say.
No, they're getting very extinct.
Yeah. Wanted to talk to you about. Now we were talking about as a merchant. Back when, say, your brother's store, people just came to the store to see who was there a lot of the times, didn't it? It's a social
they
place.
Called it loafer. Yes, that's right.
It was sort of a social spot.
And even after I went in, they on bad days or rainy days, some of them would come and stay halves the days, just to see who come and to see what they could hear.
That's a good place to hear and see people gather the news and what have you. So that's, as I said, when people sold their produce, and if they didn't want to trade it up, and they could just give a,
You'd give them a due bill and due so and so.
and then later they could come back and
Mm-hmm.
get whatever they wanted.
And then, of course, there's credit. A lot went in debt.
You had a big credit book, didn't you?
Yeah,
for
that's
that?
right. And but I miss the people.
Oh, I bet you do.
I miss my customers and children that come to the store and's grown up. You hardly know 'em.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
You reminisce back and you miss your customers.
I bet you do. I bet you do.
And I still wonder about their well-being, you know. They're getting along.
We were talking earlier about some of the customs that the mountain people had. It's it might be a little unique, and a lot, as I understand it, you can explain it to us, I guess. A lot of times men didn't like to wear new shoes, did they?
Well, now, you and I were talking. I don't know too much about that. That's
I've heard that they.
one custom. Now I heard, and that wasn't in my lifetime. My mama had heard this, that some of the girls that owned a store would try on the hose. See, you know, just try them on. But
Well, I have heard that occasionally a man didn't like to wear new shoes, and he would have someone to break them in for him.
wear 'em before he did.
Yeah, because they were a little bit
Tied.
tight, and they'd get rocking hands.
Well, that
on.
could very well be.
I've heard that. So you serve this whole area. Those two stores probably serve right up to close Virginia.
Well, yes, and
In
while
Virginia.
Brenna's was in, they'd come from White Top down here. And while Brenna's, the customers would come on the train from White Top and wait for it to go back. And you know, Ruth had a beauty shop
Right.
in his store.
And they'd have time to get their hair done, didn't they?
Yeah.
Sort of makes one long for the good old days, don't it?
And guys was, after they got cars, it was only about 13 or 14 cents a gallon.
Oh my goodness. Well, for a long time he had about the only car around, didn't he?
Yeah.
Well, there's something else I was thinking about while we were talking. Another thing that's been rather influenced our community is we might reminisce about this Presbyterian church down here.
Well, before we get on to the church or religion, Will Weaver, you know, had a store before Uncle Will Little did up yonder.
Oh.
And he
was Will Weaver's store where Will Little's?
Uh-huh. And he would get a barrel of ice cream on Saturday. And that's the first ice cream I ever saw. But it's a big old barrel of ice cream. I don't know where he got it or how he got it, but he would get ice cream in.
On the train.
I guess so. I'd
Probably
say.
had a little refrigeration or something.
And
Packet it
then
up.
he'd get bananas on the stalk and hang them up. And law, how good tickle we were to go get ice cream and bananas.
Yeah, he had to sell it out that day.
And he had the post office at one time before Uncle Will Little did.
Mm-hmm.
Will Weaver did.
Did he have to sell his ice cream out that day, or was it?
Well, yeah,
patronized?
he'd have to.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have had.
But I bet he had no trouble selling it.
No, no. Because people knew, I guess it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a blacksmith shop up there by the side of his,
Now, who had the blacksmith?
Charlie Barker.
Charlie Barker.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I bet there's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Well, it was a busy place then,
Yes,
wasn't
it was.
Wow. It's just, I don't know. Everything, as we say, is moving into the or people go to West Jefferson shopping and all that, most of that sort of thing. But it's a pity to see the little communities go down.
Yeah, it worries you.
Yeah.
You think of it at night when of all the good times and the good things. And then getting back to the church, Dr. Stone, brought the chautauquas up here, pitched big tents in the schoolhouse meadow.
And that was before the Presbyterian Church was built. Is that
Uh-huh.
right? What was that, in the 20s or 30s?
Well, it had been in the late 20s, I'd say, because our church was the cornerstone, I believe, is in 31.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Stone and the Presbyterian Church has had a great impact into this area.
Dr. Stone will live on and on, yeah.
He will. Now the first Chautauquas, maybe we could talk just a little bit about them under the tent.
Uh-huh.
Of course, I was a small little girl,
Yeah.
but people came from everywhere, didn't
Yeah,
they?
yeah, the tent was full.
And they had Bible school in the day,
Uh-huh.
and preaching at night.
That's right. 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Now they're too busy for 4 or 5 days.
Too busy for church service on Sunday, really. Now, tell us a little bit about the teachers that they brought in here. Where did they stay
Well, they
for the Bible school?
they were allotted out, maybe to one place. I know they've stayed here a lot, and I guess they stayed with your mother, and then for lunch we'd have 5 and 6 teachers and the preacher. Then they would each member invite them to their house for dinner or for supper, and then they'd go back to their staying place at night.
And just take breakfast with them, I guess, in the
Uh-huh.
morning.
That's right.
Well, they had some big, at that time they were called big preachers. I believe, let's see, Mr. Gillespie,
Yeah.
he was well known in
Yeah.
the Presbyterian church.
Dr. Gillespie, and there's a Childress, and they,
Ted Fix, was he a evangelist that came?
I believe,
Seems to me he was a missionary, was he not?
I seem like he was.
Uh-huh. And then I know one of my teachers was a little Chinese girl.
Uh-huh.
She was from China. Very.
They were dedicated. They were all dedicated and real good. Miss Hunt, of course,
Now,
Miss Penley.
they had at night. They'd have such crowds there. They'd have to have the law officer out, wouldn't they?
Well, yeah, I think so. I believe that they would come, maybe to hear preaching and
Keep things quiet
Uh-huh,
too,
yeah.
because a lot of the times, I guess the young men who was there to walk their girlfriends home, some of them didn't go in, and it kept things quiet
yeah,
too. And those were good old days.
yeah,
too.
they were.
What's some of the biggest changes you've seen?
I can remember Miss Graham when we first got our Sunday school organized. We had Sunday school 2 or 3 years in the schoolhouse before we ever
The
got-
Graham School.
ever got her church, and I can, she can always do so good, and I can remember her getting up and singing and saying we would have an evergreen Sunday school, and I wondered what an evergreen Sunday school was. I didn't know too much about Sunday school, and and of course that was the year round.
Oh, I see.
Evergreen. She called it the Evergreen Sunday School.
Uh-huh.
And you see, that's winter and summer too.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well,
But I don't know what would be the biggest changes, but it gradually changes, and I guess the Church of Coming would be one of the greatest, because if we leave the Lord out of things, we've left it all.
yeah. Now, one other thing while we're talking about changes, of course, I'm thinking of the 40 flood. You're right near Horse Creek here.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have to leave your home
Well, I lived 7 miles the other side of West Jefferson, but Aline was 3 weeks old, and I had been at home, and James come and got me and her,
Oh,
and we went out in front of the bridges.
oh, really? You were visiting your mother?
I'd come, yeah, and I'd come up here for a week, and she was 3 weeks old, so I was at Fleetwood and high on the hill, and I guess I slept most of the day. And James went to the river, and I never thought of such a thing. And then it was so long before I could ever come back home because there's no roads.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was washed away. But I very well remember the 3 year ago flood,
Mm-hmm.
how I walked and prayed.
Well, that was a bad thing, too.
Yes, it was. That's when the trussels went out, and they had to carry Della out down here.
Oh.
And I just walked and prayed. I never knowed I'd never eat anything all day.
Well, if it hadn't happened during the day, I don't know what would have happened. If it happened at
If
night,
it had happened at night and people had got out, there'd have been so many killed.
you didn't have to leave your home.
No,
Of course,
it come up on the steps,
It
but
did.
and Rex and Nancy come down here. And
Well, did your mother have to leave in the 40 flood, or could they stay?
no, they stayed.
How about Brennis and his wife?
They left because the creek cut through under the railroad track and come right down.
Oh. So it come right
But
down the
it
road.
got up on Bruner's porch 3 years ago.
Oh, it did?
But they stayed at home.
Uh-huh. Well,
It went down real fast. It just went like dropping a stone. When the trestle went, that turned the pressure.
oh, it was holding everything back, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess the 40 flood took trestle too, didn't it?
I guess it did.
I think it left it swaying. It took it out from under
Uh-huh.
it, you know,
I
just left
think
the rails.
I think it turned the rails up on their ends. I believe it did.
I remember people walked across it.
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather, who was aged, walked up to the store and wanted to see the sights, you know. And so when he started back, your brother Brennis asked if he could have one of the big boys, or there was some men in the store, asked if he could walk my grandfather across the bridge, you know, to see that he didn't fall or anything. And Granddad said no, he's afraid one of them might get hurt, so he refused.
I can remember him coming to the store. He never did come after I went to the store, but he rode an old white horse.
Yes, he had a white horse.
And he'd put it all in a sack and divide it tie the ends, you know, and divide it into both ends and put it across the horse.
You see, he was an old man. You see, that was his second marriage, and he was always an old man to me.
That horse, wasn't he 40-some-year-old when he died? Borden kept him.
So, yeah, as long as
he lived.
Yeah, that was his white horse.
But I can remember your grandma. She'd come to the store. Wiley Hurley, he'd always come every month to get me to. Most of the old men would come with their Social Security checks, and I would count it out to them. And I know Claude Ham come one time, and I cashed it, and it was Wiley Hurley, and he turned, he got sort of disturbed.
Mm-hmm.
And he went off and left it laying on, and I had to run and overtake him. Left his money a-laying.
Poor old fellow. Well, now, what you're thinking about when, say, you were a little girl and people were riding horseback, and you had this shop up here, the blacksmith shop. Now, to walk out there on a Saturday, how many horses would you probably see?
I don't know, but there'd be a lot of horses. And in 60 now, people had to come to my store with sleds and horses, in the 60 snow.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. I wanted to ask about that.
And they'd just have to, they'd be parked way up. There were horses, they'd come after feed and groceries. There's no vehicle could go.
Is that right?
Mm-mm.
Well, this was a pretty isolated spot then, wasn't
Yes,
it?
it was.
You were close enough you could walk out to your store.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Now, you had the telephones in those days. That was in the 60s.
Yeah.
You had telephones here years ago, too, didn't you? And then they
Well,
took
my mama had a crank telephone, you know, on the
Mhm.
wall. And the switchboard, I believe, well, I remember it had been at two different places. Once at Hattie Hartsog's and once at my grandma Little's.
bash you.
Hmm.
Well, we were mentioning about things. Now, there's an old iron mine, I understand, down the road here. Do you know where that's located? That they used to get iron ore from? It was down about
Isn't it on the curve below